And we have returned. You're listening to CSC Talk Radio. This is Beth Ann. We're in the final segment of today's show. It has been a Free-for-All Friday. We've talked quite a bit. I think I got fired up, and I think Tim was a little fired up. Maybe Neil's going to help us. Neil from Missouri. Neil, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's finally quit raining, so things are starting to dry out a little bit.
Yeah, well, we needed the rain, but I'm kind of like you. I prefer sunshine.
Yeah, it's way too dusty to mow if we don't get a little rain.
Oh, yeah.
But, you were talking about pushing back, and going on the offense. And I'm just telling you right now, if you're not in court, you're not on the offense.
Mm.
We don't have anything left, any form of defense left. If you want to go on the offense, we can't go, excuse me, we can't go on the offensive militarily because there's no way.
No way.
Once they took away the military from the citizen by eliminating the militia and creating a standing army, there's no way as a citizen you're going to take that on. The only line of defense we have is in the courtroom. Every time some criminal in government tells you, thou shalt or thou shalt not, and it doesn't apply with the laws of God set forth in the Bible, you need to walk in that courtroom and sue them and tell them, look, you can't be doing this to us. Law of God says this. You don't have any right to tell us otherwise.
Now,
and that's the only way you're going to put. That's really the only way you're going to put a stop to them because now you're getting in their pocketbook. That's the only thing they respect.
Do we have enough judges that would uphold that?
Well, I don't know anymore. The court system's getting pretty corrupt.
Well, that's why this is so important. That's why this particular, and I'm looking at this as both on both sides of this with Kavanaugh. That's why this is so important because they're running this country through the courts instead of through the legislation, and
Right,
so they can't have a. And I don't know how you feel about Kavanaugh. He's not a perfect guy, and I know a lot of conservatives are against him with some decisions he's made on the Fourth Amendment, but they're scared to death that he's going to change Roe v. Wade, and they're scared to death he's going to follow the Constitution instead of their emotions and their socialistic views. And that's how they've been running these courts. That's why we had a federal circuit, the Ninth Circuit Court judge from Hawaii going after the president when he was trying to secure this nation from people coming in here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's where the problem lies. The problem doesn't really lie with the United States Supreme Court because the lower courts ignore whatever they say. They don't care.
Seem to, don't they?
Simply don't care. And less than 1/10 of 1% of all cases submitted to the Supreme Court ever get heard. So you've got less than 1/10 of 1% chance of ever getting your case heard by the Supreme Court. The problem lies in the lower courts. Trump needs to focus on replacing all these appellate court judges in all 12 circuits and the USDC circuit. Those all need to be, we need people like Kavanaugh in all those positions because we've got all these bleeding heart liberals in there that are out to destroy the country and turn it into and promote the socialist police state even more than it already is. And as you go down the line, get into the state court system, we're getting the same problem. And I've watched this over the last 40 years. 40 years ago, we had pretty much a good set of judges. They were actually judges. When you walked into that courtroom and you said, here's my case, the judge would look at the opposing party and say, well, what's your answer? Anymore, the judge sits there, and whichever side he comes down on as far as his own personal opinion, that's the side he promotes, and that's the side he works for.
And that's what we're,
working for anybody.
Yeah, he's supposed to be reading that Constitution.
And the people need to start calling these judges on that. Every time that judge gets out of line, every time he steps over the line, every state has a state disciplinary committee on judges. You need to file your complaints with that state disciplinary committee and start getting these judges booted out of office.
I agree. And, the problem is nobody wants to run for them except these lefties. And how many times we've had judges in our small little community and county, where there's only one person running. There's nobody else contesting them. And I don't know if they're good or bad or in between, but I should know. But it's that's a problem, too. And another thing, what they've done to Kavanaugh, that is sending a message out. Don't you dare try to follow this president or this Constitution, or we're coming after you. I mean, that's what the journalists, so-called journalists on CNN said. We're going after Kavanaugh. I mean, they admit it.
Oh, yeah.
So, this is a warning for anybody else who dares even think about standing up and doing what's right. But if we would stand up and do what's right and quit waiting to be defended, he hadn't, the rule of law is just gone with some of these lefties. They didn't, he was guilty until proven he was innocent. He was guilty until he could prove himself innocent. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's the opposite of what we stand for here, which I know, that. Right. I'm just getting fired up. But
that's generally what happens in almost all your court cases. If you can't prove you're innocent, they're going to find you guilty.
Yeah.
It's really gotten
just
that
wrong.
bad in this country.
It is. It's wrong.
And the judges, they sit there, and I've watched case after case in these criminal court cases where a judge sits there and he takes on the role of the prosecutor. I sat in court one day and had a judge tell the prosecutor, shut up, sit down, and he proceeded to prosecute the defendant.
Wow.
It's just ridiculous what's happening, especially in these lower courts. And this is where the citizens can get involved. You get in there, you use that small claims court to go after people that are jerking you around and taking your money away from you and stealing. Every time somebody comes and steals your kid's bicycle, you take his butt into that courtroom on a small claims, you get the judgment, and while he's sitting in jail for theft, you get his lunch money. And that's how you put a stop to this with these criminals, because these guys that go to jail, they don't care. They got 3 hots and a cot. They have their own gangs and their own parties while they're in jail.
Yeah.
You start taking their lunch money away from them while they're sitting in jail, and they got to eat that jail food, and that's all they've got to eat, 3 times a day. I guarantee you that'll do more to put a stop to this thieving in this country than anything else.
Yeah, hit their pocketbooks.
Short of cutting your hands off, of course.
Yeah, well, that's another denomination that does, or another religion that does that. We're going to have to go because we're just about out of time. Thank you, Neil.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not going to have time to share what I had hoped to share, but this is an article coming from the Daily Signal, which is part of the Heritage Foundation. It's written by Jarrett Stepman. I like a lot of things that he writes. He talks about Americans have almost entirely forgotten their history. And we have seen protests against our history, against the statues. But they're talking about a little test for citizenship and how many people, particularly the young ones, the young people, 45 years and younger, 19% of them couldn't pass the test. They didn't know even the basics. What is Benjamin Franklin known for? 37% of them thought it was for a light bulb. They don't even know what the original 13 colonies were. One of them thought that not one of them, but some of them thought that World War II General Dwight Eisenhower was the Vietnam War general or Civil War. And it said 2% of them answered, while most knew the cause of the Cold War, 2% of them actually thought it was climate change. Money into the education is not the answer. It's not the answer at all. If you can't do anything but send your kids to public school, you need to be teaching them truth at home. That's the only place they're going to learn it. Get that Constitution out, and I'm talking to Beth Ann as well. We've got to we need to do refresher courses, and we need to know our rights. We need to know our Constitution, and put those 10 Commandments on the door so you remember them, coming and going. Take charge and bring America home.